Hello everyone, my name is Nobukanya Tlabangana and welcome to Voice It Youth Talk Show, a talk show for the youth from the youth, whereby as the youth we get to voice out challenges that we may not be able to communicate with our parents, guardians or even our friends. Well, Voice It has got your back. I'm not alone. Joining me today is my lovely co-host Brendan.
Hello, I am the lovely Brandon, and today we are under the theme real life issues. And today we've got two wonderful guests, my handsome brother Michael and my beautiful sister Kosi here, and we're going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, my name is Nobukosi Swanda, Kosi in short, and I'm happy to be here today.
Yeah, I am new here and my name is Michael and Buffer. And yeah, hopefully the episode will be great.
Thank you. So to begin this wonderful session, the first question is, can failure actually be a setup for greater purposes or for a greater purpose?
The answer is very much simple. It seems like a rhetorical question. The answer is yes, failure can. I would like to define failure as, you see, when you have set goals for yourself, you have something that you want to do, something that you want to achieve, right? So when you miss the mark and you don't actually achieve what you want to achieve, that's my definition of failure. When I don't do well, for example, maybe at school, I was reading for a test and studying so hard, expecting myself to pass. Then all of a sudden, results are coming. And yeah, it's not looking good. So that's failure to me. So in that moment, I wouldn't realize, which this is actually good for me. But later on, as I just review my day and introspect, I realize that that is something that is good for me, something that will help me to be able to grow and become a better person. Because God says in Jeremiah 29 verse 11, for I know the plans that I have for you. Yeah, and so on and so on. So we have to realize that God has plans for us to succeed, successful plans for us to do good in life. So we have to realize that failure is not just failure. It's like a redirection.
Actually, on that, a lot of people always quote Jeremiah 29:11. And for a very long time, I felt like it was just a verse that everyone quotes. But I just want to ask, do you have a personal testimony or where that verse actually applies? Because we can all just say something about it. But do you ever have somewhere in your life where that verse actually applied, where you failed, but then you realized later that it was actually better for you?
Of course, you want to take that one?
I think just going back to school, we're students. So just going back to school, I remember it was O-level. I panicked so much, final exams, am I going to pass, am I going to fail? And I let that worry and stress consume me, and I was so worried. And it's so hard to trust. We say trust God's plans, it'll all work out, but it's very hard to do. But in the end, I did well, and then looking back, I realized I should have just trusted that God has it all planned out for me. So it's very easy to say, Jeremiah 29:11, God says he knows the plans he has for us. And, we say that in passing. But looking back at that time in my life, I really should have just trusted God, because in the end, it all worked out for the good. So, yeah.
Right. On the issue of failure. So now, when you fail, what lies are easy to believe and what truths can conquer those lies?
So when we're faced with whatever trial, tribulation, failure, rejection it may be, it is so easy for us to dwell on the negative.
Right.
To dwell on negative thoughts and to let those thoughts consume us and define us. So what lies do you start telling yourself? I'm worthless. I am a failure. I'm not good enough. God doesn't love me anymore. God cannot use me anymore. It's so easy to dwell on those lies. They're lies because they're not true. So to dwell on those negative thoughts. But what does the Bible have to say about all of this? When you feel worthless, what does God say? Our worth is not defined by our success, our accolades. Ellen White says, God sees not as men see. Men will judge you based off of appearances, based off of what you've done, what you've achieved in life. But what does God do? God searches your heart and then judges you righteously. So that's what the Bible has to say about that. When you feel like God doesn't love you anymore, we need to know that God's love for us is unconditional. There's nothing we could ever do that could stop God from loving us. A good example of this in the Bible is the story of the prodigal son. This boy is living lavish, as we would say. He had everything he could ever need and want in life. But we see him leave his father's house to be of the world and be with the world. And then when that doesn't work out, in the end, he then decides, you know what, let me go back home. I have a loving father. I have everything I could possibly want and need back home. Let me go back. And we find that father there waiting with open arms, waiting to receive this boy. So in that story, we are the boy and God is the father. He's always there, waiting with open arms, waiting for us to come back to him. So there's nothing we could do that could make God stop loving us. We're saying, what failure or rejection? Maybe You've been trying to let go of a certain sin. You've prayed to God, asking him to give you strength to overcome, but you failed and you've fallen right back into it again. God still loves you, even when you've fallen back into that sin, but he's there waiting for you to come back to him.
To add on to what Kosi was saying, at times it's not necessarily the lies that you tell yourself, but actually something that is true. For example, Moses stuttered or was a star, right? But he used that as an excuse in order for him to not fulfill the purpose that God had in plan for him. And Jeremiah as well. Jeremiah was telling God, no, Mina, I'm a child, I'm a youth. How can I fulfill your purpose? That was true, but then it was something that hindered him to be able to fulfill that purpose. So at times it will be the truth, yes, but then we use it as an excuse for us not to do what God says we should do.
Actually, on that note, the way the conversation and the direction that it's taking, it's making it seem maybe as though God is the one that always brings failures. But what about the failures that we bring on ourselves because of the consequences of our own actions? What lies can we tell ourselves in those situations? Like where I failed, I did something I shouldn't have done, and I know. What toxic lie can I actually tell myself in that situation?
But then does God really bring failure?
No, he doesn't. Exactly. But then my question is, what lie can we tell ourselves in the situation where we have caused ourselves to fail? What are some of the lies we tell ourselves?
I think that's what Kosi was alluding to as well.
God has forsaken me. Those are lies we tell ourselves. But you brought this onto yourself. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, cognitive distortions that you say, okay, I'm not good enough. For example, me, I'm young, so I'm young, I cannot do this, or whatever. Those simple things that you tell yourself, not good enough, I cannot do this. How could I, of all people, be able to do this? Thinking that you're not.
I think also blaming. I was looking from the direction of sometimes when I fail and I do something wrong, and it comes back to bite me, I tend to blame everyone else
around you,
except take accountability for what I've done. So that's also maybe one of the lies that I can tell myself to say, but no. The other person didn't fulfill their side of the story. That one didn't do this. That one didn't do this. But I myself am failing to take accountability that even I was wrong in the situation.
Yeah, blaming everyone else but yourself for the things that you did, because you had the choice to choose between right and wrong, but you chose wrong. So, why blame everyone else but yourself?
Exactly.
Now, there's this verse, Romans 8, verse 28. What does Romans 8, verse 28 mean to you?
So
in this case?
Let me read it out. It says, and we know that all things work together for God, or for good, to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. So the verse starts by saying, and we know that all things work. It reminds me of Philippians 4, verse 18, which says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So in order for me to do everything that I want to do, God should be in the center. In order for me to succeed and fulfill the purpose that I have or the purpose that God has for me, I should always trust in God. You should have that relationship with God. That is what helps you to face disappointment, helps you to face failure or rejection from anyone else. You should have that relationship with God and constantly grow in that relationship. Pray to God and pray with others as well. Pray with a friend, family member, anyone, and just read the Bible every day, even though it's hard to do. But it's something that you have to do as well.
Actually, on that note, when you spoke about praying with others as well, how can we support friends who are going through that rejection period or that failure period? Because it can get very lonely.
So first things first, you may not always have the solutions or the right words to say, but just be there to listen. Secondly, which now that I think about it, should have been the first thing I said, pray with them. Pray with them and pray for them. tell them about your own personal experiences. Sometimes it really helps knowing that someone else has been through what you're going through. It's very easy to say, oh no, you'll get through this, you'll be fine, when you've never been through what that person is going through. Right. But if you relate to that specific situation and, you tell them about how God carried you through that, it helps them, always remember, Uti, God will carry me through this. If he could get through it, then I definitely will too. So, yeah. And then remind them that failure isn't final. There's a verse, I just can't remember where it is. It says, though the righteous fall 7 times, they will rise again. So failure isn't the end of the world. It's let it not be the defining moment of your life. There is life after that failure with God. So, yeah, failure isn't the end.
Actually, another very crucial verse is Psalm 34:19. Great are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord doesn't leave them alone. So even in that time of failure, even that period, we should always remember that we are not alone. Right. And it's very easy to just quote, but really, when you know that in your heart that He's with you, there's this joy and peace that you feel.
Yeah, that's right. I think you have to have an experience with God first in order for you to understand these verses. It's one thing reading about it, and it's another thing actually experiencing them. Going through that tough time, that tough period in your life, failing actually, in order for you to understand God better and understand Him in a different light. So our failures, they're not just failures, they're opportunities for us to better ourselves. So, yeah.
Right. Are there any biblical characters that we can take note of who experienced failure or rejection, and what was their response to that?
Okay, we have Peter as our first example. Peter failed as a disciple. He denies Jesus, and then there's a point where he's, cutting off the soldier's ear. He failed as a soldier. Sorry, as a disciple. But then what happens to Peter in the end? He is then used to lead the early church. Job lost everything. He felt rejected. He lost it all. And the people closest to him were telling him to curse God, But Job remained faithful to God. And in the end, he was blessed. Joseph was rejected by his own family members. But, he stays faithful to God even after he's jailed unjustly. And in the end, he becomes the governor of Egypt. So I think those are biblical characters we can learn from.
Right.
Another example is Elijah. Elijah was rejected by Ahab and Jezebel. And what he did he actually ran away. And he fled to the wilderness there. And what I would like to draw from that experience is God was there for him. God actually took his time, say, okay, my child, I get that you're going through such a difficult time, but I'll not forsake you. I'll be there with you and I'll help you be able to get through this. So, yeah.
Paul says we have not a high priest who does not understand our infirmities. And also says that God understands that we are just dust. We are just merely human beings. Yeah. So he knows that even sometimes, no matter how hard things get, actually, He understands that we are weak, and He's also there to actually to strengthen us.
He gets that very human after all.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this has been a wonderful episode. We are going to go into our question and answer episode where we actually tackle questions from other people who have been experiencing failure, and they're wondering exactly where God is in this and how they can actually see His presence. So we'll catch you on the second segment.
Welcome back to our second segment of our episode, still under the topic, how can I handle failure or rejection but still trust God's plan?
Yes, actually, as we go into that one, there's quite an interesting question here. It says, how does God bring out something beautiful out of brokenness and failure?
I'm sure we're all familiar with refinement of minerals, and you take the raw material, then afterwards you refine it, then at the end it gains value. For example, diamonds. You need to put diamonds under pressure in order for it to be something valuable and something useful. So I think it's the same thing with us. We go through all these trials, all these tribulations in order for us to become better beings, because we are raw at first, because we have so much sin and our hearts are deceitful, Then we need to go through that process of sanctification, justification first, of course, of us being better and our hearts being made pure through God, of course, not our own doing. So, yeah.
Actually, one of the disciples, when he writes, he says, when I go through this crucible, I will come out as pure gold. So it's actually, and if you see in the Bible, I feel like it's a pattern that God has. Look at people that are in the genealogy of Jesus. You've got people like Solomon. You've got people like David, those who failed a lot, but God brought out something beautiful out of that. So I think it's within God's character to show us that even when we have failed, he loves those who are looked down upon.
Even Adam, the first man in the genealogy, what did he do? Said, took the fruit from Eve, ate it. Then afterwards, he realized that this is something bad that I did, and went to God, and everything was okay.
And these people then become people that we can learn from.
Yes.
As we're reading the Bible and we're seeing, the sins David committed or whoever, but how they become better people at the end of it all. We then learn from these people. So, yeah.
And there's a lot of people who then see those failures and they say, no, but if David did it, who am I to...
Which is wrong.
Yeah, that's the wrong mindset.
Right. Then there's this interesting question. It says, why does failure feel so personal?
I think Michael talked about it earlier. When you've set a certain goal for yourself, if you want to achieve this and you've been working towards that goal tirelessly, there'll be a test at school. You've been working tirelessly, not reaching that mark, not achieving that goal. It's bound to feel personal. It's bound to, you even start asking yourself, okay, why me? Because there are people I studied with who did excellently well. So it's bound to feel personal because you put your all into it. But remember that you don't know everything. So God knows the plan he has for your life. We talked about Jeremiah 29 verse 11 earlier on. God knows the plans he has for your life. So there's a reason, sometimes you brought it onto yourself, maybe it isn't enough. But if you've been working tirelessly towards that goal, it's bound to feel personal. But remember that God knows what he has planned out for your life.
Right. So this person should take note that it's not failure, it's redirection.
Exactly.
Yeah. Someone here says, how did biblical figures like Joseph or David deal with rejection?
I think because I already talked about Joseph. I'll talk about, David. David was quite an interesting character because as the king, I would remember this story of him where he saw something and wanted it so badly.
And as it is.
Yeah, he saw something, so I'm saying it as it is. He saw it, was like, no, you know what, I want that thing and I'll have it by fire, by force.
Right.
And he took the wife of Uriah to be his own, and did things with her. Yeah, of course. Then, what was the question, by the way?
Yeah, how did the biblical characters deal with failure or rejection?
Oh, then afterwards, when he was rejected by everyone and when he was rejected by God, I remember him pleading with God, but you know what? I am human. God, I understand with you have such a great purpose for me, but I am human. I still sin at times. The lusts of the flesh, they get the better of me, which is something that we face as well. But we have to realize that we have strength to be able to overcome anything. At times, we have the strength on our own, and at times, God gives us the strength to be able to overcome the thing. And at times, God is the one that does it for us.
Yes.
So we have to realize that it's either I'm doing it, God is empowering me to do it, or God is the one tackling that problem for me.
Actually, quite interestingly, one of my favorite authors says, if David had remembered Isaiah 54 verses 10, when he was running away from Saul, he wouldn't have felt like he has to lie or deceive anyone. So I think sometimes the reason why when we're in rejection or in failure, we end up doing other things, it's because we do not remember the promises that are actually in the scripture. Right. So I think holding on to those promises, helps us to actually withstand even within those failures?
I think the other problem is we tend to cover sin with more sin instead of going back to God. Or it's very hard to go back to God, that's the truth.
Dig a deeper hole.
Yeah, as much as we say, you know what, pray about it. Read the Bible, it's hard to reach that realization that you actually need to go back to God.
And sometimes you actually realize it late after having fallen into more sin.
Yeah.
Listen,
There's
That's
another
true.
question that says, what does it look like to keep moving forward in faith after a setback?
This is you saying, you know what? I don't know, Lord, I don't know what you have planned for me, but I'm going to trust you. I think we need to talk about the how part of trusting.
It's not easy to trust God.
It's very
That's the
hard.
truth.
But this is you saying, Lord, I'm going to trust you. Stay strong in prayer. Yeah, stay strong in prayer. And you're saying, this that I was working towards didn't work out. I don't know why, but I'm moving forward. I'm moving forward with you. I'm keeping you at the center of this work that I'm doing. And I'm just going to trust you completely. So, yeah.
But then how do you pray when your mind is messed up? If you sin, you also feel guilty for your sin.
True.
So how do you set your mind into that mood whereby you have to pray, even though you're still deep in sin, but you realize, no man, I need to change. What do you have to do in order for you to be in that mind? Yeah. So to realize and go back.
It goes back to what we mentioned before. I was telling someone the other day that the only sure word that is there in this universe is God's word. The only promise that you can ever actually trust. Because I can say something, she can say something. How many of us have broken our promises? I think we all have. Even the people that are watching this have broken a lot. The ones that we've kept are actually fewer. But God keeps all of his. So the first thing is to identify the promises that he has for us. Those are in the word. And then so even when you've sinned, you look at Psalms chapter 51, where David is asking God to say, wash me and I shall be whiter than snow. So then when you're praying and you say, Lord, David asked you and you did it for him, do it for me as well. But if you don't even know those promises, how are you going to claim them?
True. I think another important thing is your surrounding. Have friends that actually drive you closer to God, not away from him. Your surrounding matters the most in order for you to grow spiritually.
Very true.
Yeah, because if you have friends that are diverting you away from the Lord, you're not going to be able to go back. Then there's another question that says, is it okay to be honest with God about our frustration? Per se, you have failed and you're frustrated.
Yeah, definitely it is okay. Because who else will you tell when something
else is
better?
gonna help you?
Yeah, who else will help you? I can tell
Find
Kosi.
comfort in other people
But then is it enough
Are
though?
they going to help you?
temporarily, and you'd think that they helped you, but then in the long term, they
You want that permanent solution. That is why you should go back to God. Because I remember, I think it's Peter when he talks about casting all our cares to God. And Christ himself saying, Guti, come to me only who
are heavy laden.
in labor, so that I can give you rest. So we need to go back to God because remember, we are having a relationship with God. How can you have a relationship with someone you're not open with? If you're not open with God and honest with him, how can you have that relationship with him? So in order for you to develop that relationship, in order for you to cross a passion, you should be honest with yourself and honest with God and tell God, God, this is a situation, this is not happening to me and I want to grow. So kindly help me to grow.
It's like any relationship, really. If Kanya and I are friends, how is our friendship going to grow if we're not honest with each other? So, yeah, it's okay.
You need that point of vulnerability. You cannot say you love someone if you cannot be vulnerable with them. You cannot say you love God if you're not open with God. It cannot happen.
I think there's also that nice hymn. I really like that hymn. It says, I tell him all my sorrows. I tell him all my joy. I tell him all that troubles me. I tell him what annoys me.
Yes.
So I think also we also, God, there's certain things that God won't do unless we say them. We actually have to ask. We can't say, Lord, you know my heart. Yes, but tell him. You know, also when you're confessing, maybe it's me, but when I'm confessing some sins, I'm like, Lord, you know what I did, huh?
All of us
Say it out.
I did this and this and this, and I'm sorry. Even in your frustration, you say, Lord, my family is stressing me. I don't understand why this person is doing this. Say it. And I think it reduces the probability of you going to gossip to someone else because you've already told God
Right.
everything.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not really frustration, but then it's guilt. Sometimes we feel very guilty, and then now to fall back in the Lord when you're feeling that guilty, how does one then ensure that they fall back to the Lord after they felt very guilty
I think
and
you
don't
need
want to face Him?
I think you need to forgive yourself first.
How?
It's hard to forgive yourself. That's the thing. It's very hard. But when you sin, of course you'll feel guilt. So you have to first forgive yourself. How do you do that? You ask God. It's weird to say it like that, but you have to ask God to be able to
Forgive
And
forgive
remember, the
yourself.
enemy is always going to remind you what you have done.
And he does,
Yeah.
Shem. He does all the
That's
time.
where-
This is
Yeah.
that opportunity.
Yeah, yeah.
And then that's
Over
when
and
you go
over
back to
again.
that promise now. So when the enemy reminds you, you say, the Lord said, if I'm forgiven, I'm forgiven. Why are you reminding me? Yeah. There's also a question here that says, it reminds me of Isaiah 40:31. It says, how do we actually wait on the Lord in difficult times? Let's talk about the how part. I feel like how? Okay, I'm in a difficult position. Nothing is moving. I have tried everything. How do you actually wait on the Lord?
That's a tricky one.
You're praying, you keep
friends.
praying. You're
You're
still in the
praying.
same position.
It's the same. Nothing is changing. How do you wait?
I think that's where your friends come in. You have to talk to your friends. But it's easy for me to say, okay, go to God. But then my relationship with God is like strained. So I cannot go to Him freely. It takes me time. So first of all, you should come to God and try to cause, Pella, this happened. So
And then
I think that's the first step.
Actually, also going to pray for you and like sort of
Right.
strengthen you.
Yeah.
But I also think it also comes with having a peace. With waiting, you have to be peaceful while you wait. So it's literally that. Even though things are tough, you just say, okay, fine. Let's just, composure. Demure. Mindful.
Yeah.
And just, remember His promises.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for watching this episode. Now catch us on our next episode when we tackle more throbbing issues.